you've had a chance to watch the somewhat extended introduction. It's essential listening before we get into the detail of the mindset, and this video is the first part of that discussion. Hope you enjoy. Right, next step. This is a conceptual framework, and it's quite important that you appreciate that everything we're going to be talking about, everything that we're going to be doing, is encompassed within this high-level conceptual framework. Everything else is basically detail. But at least if you know what the conceptual framework looks like, then you'll be able to place what we're doing and what we're talking about at any point in time within this framework. I think that's quite important, that you have a clear idea of what the structure is of developing yourself as a good or complete trader. Alright, now again you'll see there are the three core attributes: the mindset, the skill set, and the rule set. Some of you who've known me from the past will know that I always talk about the mindset. The skill set, I might talk about technical analysis skills, the ability to identify if market conditions are appropriate for a particular strategy. All of that's skill set. Then the rule set really is the strategy, or strategies, because it's certainly possible to trade multiple strategies, and longer term that's certainly what I aim to be able to get you guys to do. But really it still comes down to those three things: mindset, skill set, rule set. But there's an overarching principle here that's really, really essential for us to talk about, and that is the philosophy of dealing with uncertainty, the philosophy of the unknown. It's actually quite a big subject in epistemology, which of course is the philosophy of knowledge. Is what is unknowledge? What do we not know? This is a very, very interesting subject, one which I find that very few traders seem to engage in. Admittedly, us, traders are generally very practically oriented people. We're not typically academics, ivory tower types, because those people don't really engage in anything practical. We survive on real results. So any theoretical stuff is kind of secondary. But I find that in becoming a good trader, all the people that I've taught in the past, those who've been successful, most of them have found it helpful not just to understand what they're doing, but why they're doing it. And the biggest why behind what we do is this philosophy of uncertainty. And well, why is that? Because that's what we're dealing with. Most people don't fully appreciate what trading is actually all about. Sure, we buy and sell stuff. It's about trying to generate a profit, capital growth, all of that. Engaging in the markets, etc. Certainly. But at a much more fundamental level, what we're doing here is grappling with the reality that we do not know what is going to happen next. And that is what I mean by the philosophy of uncertainty. The unknowable unknown, as I think David Hume in the 1800s called it. Now, why is that important to us? Well, you will see that because there is a choice in how we can deal with this problem. We can take the ostrich approach and stick our heads in the sand, which is what 99% or 98% potentially of people do in trading, and 2% don't. Or alternatively, what we can do is realize that what we're effectively dealing with here is an environment that's characterized by uncertainty. And in fact, if we're going to be brutally honest about it, it's not just uncertainty, it's effectively randomness. At any point in time in the market, as Mark Douglas says, anything can happen. Yes, we can see patterns. Yes, we understand that, in a trend, we generally have an impulse wave following a corrective wave. We know all this stuff. But at any individual point in time, when you have to make a decision about what you're going to do, the fact of the matter is, in the next second, anything can happen. Which means that, to all intents and purposes, we are dealing with real randomness here. Now, that generally, again, gets people a little bit worried. But it's essential that you understand that that is what we're doing, first and foremost, and it will determine much of the choices we make, first of all, in terms of the development of our mindset, Secondly, in determining and understanding the purpose of the skill set that we're looking to develop. To put that another way, the skill set is mostly about technical analysis skills. And a lot of people, when they come to trading and they've started with the rule set and they're moving into the skill set because they realize the strategies on their own are not doing the business, the reason why they will move into technical analysis, and very often this non-traders think that this is what traders can do, is you have the skills that allow you to predict what's going to happen next. By looking at a chart, even if not all the time, but certainly certain points in time, good traders are able to predict what's going to happen next. Well, that's just not true, actually. It's a complete false view of what good traders do. Yet, most people who are trading, in fact, most people who are making money in trading, believe that that is true. That your skill set is there to help you predict what's going to happen next. Now, it's not bad at doing that, okay? You can, especially when you get really good with the skill set, you can very often predict what's going to happen in the short term. But the reality is that doesn't help you become a profitable trader on its own, firstly. And secondly, it actually drives you down the wrong road in terms of risk management, which is why ultimately you will get nailed if you do that. So an understanding of what we're dealing with in terms of uncertainty will really help us to understand and determine what the purpose is behind our technical analysis. And then finally, in terms of choosing a strategy or your rule set, how you choose your rule set also needs to be determined by understanding that what we're dealing with here is the unknown. And the most successful traders in the world, when I say most successful, it means people who have managed to trade for decades and who have survived through multiple major market events, and not necessarily only survived them, but have capitalized on them. They understand this. And that's one of the core underpinning principles of my trading, is everything we do is attached to an absolute full appreciation that we're dealing here with randomness. Okay, so starting on the mindset. Our mindset draws from this philosophy of trading. I've said quite a few of these things already, so I just want to make sure. By the way, this presentation style that I'm giving over here is really just to make sure that I cover everything that I need to cover. So you'll notice that I kind of wander off the path of the discussion now and again, but usually people find that more enlightening. So yeah, again, my soapbox moments. Right, so the philosophy of trading. Mark Douglas, in his book Trading in the Zone, which is essential reading for you folks in the next month or so. If you don't have it, please let me know. Two of the key points that he makes are anything can happen, first of all. We've already discussed that. But secondly, you don't need to know what is going to happen next in order to be profitable. Now, if you just sort of think about that for a while, those two statements are like oil and water. How is that possible? How? I mean, if anything can happen, which is basically another way of saying the market is completely random, if anything can happen at any point in time, but it's possible still to make money without knowing what's going to happen next, it sounds crazy. Because if you understand the way the human brain works, we are effectively, the human brain is effectively a predictive engine. I'm going to come back to that just now. It's part of my chat in 15 minutes or so. But that's not the way our brains work. Everything that we are is geared towards an environment that we have some control over, so that we can, in fact, predict what's going to happen next. This is why trading is so difficult for people to be successful in. So I'm going to close that loop in a minute. But one of the things that's really important here is, by understanding what trading is really all about, that what we're effectively dealing with here is randomness, allows us to ask the right question. Now, as some of you have heard me say before, I don't care if you've got the right answer if you've got the wrong question. And that, unfortunately, is the case for many people who consider themselves to be traders, and many people who are in fact currently profitable as traders. They might have the right answer, but they're asking the wrong question. But what then is the right question? Well, it comes back to that dichotomy between anything can happen, and everything's basically random. But you don't need to know what's going to happen next in order to be profitable. The right question is, well, if that's true, then how? And in fact, my next little diagram over here kind of summarizes what we're saying. A good trader can engage effectively with the unknown in order to produce capital growth. The question, the right question then, if you like my little graphics, is how? How? If that is true, how on earth do you do that? That is the right question. And as you can probably appreciate already, the first thing you need to have is the right mindset. And everything I've been talking about up until now is leading up to showing you what that is. In fact, what I'm trying to do is kind of dismantle your existing mindset, and for many people, your existing understanding of what trading is all about. It's essential to dismantle that before we can put together the right mindset. Okay, so what is the right mindset? Well, let's have a look at what the traditional approach is. Okay, I hope you like my little quote there, but it is absolutely representative of most people who engage in the markets. How many traders I have spoken to who are basically have the same mindset? I can't even begin to count them. Okay, so you don't want to be the captain of the Titanic, and for many traders, to be honest with you, their trading account is basically the Titanic. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Why is this the case? Well, when it comes to dealing with uncertainty, the traditional approach, which comes from the fact that our human brain is, in fact, a predictive engine, as Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky described. They are famous Nobel Prize winners for their research on how the human brain works, practically speaking, how we make decisions, where that comes from. Essential knowledge to have. Some of the books that I'm going to point you towards, written by actual traders, refer to them all the time. Certainly Nassim Taleb refers to them all the time. Even Curtis Faith, one of the turtle traders, refers to a lot of the stuff that came out of their research. Very, very important to us as traders, how our brains actually work. And understanding that our brains are in fact predictive engines is very, very important. Now, if you think back, just as an example, I just want to illustrate this. If you think back over the history of humankind, what is it that allowed mankind to move beyond basically living like any of the other animals of the veldt? Now, there's a few things one can talk about there, obviously, but at a practical level, if you think of the first things that allowed them to move forward, one of them was the ability to cultivate crops. Another was animal husbandry. Another was building a shelter. Another was using the skins of animals to create clothes. Obviously, some of these things required the creation of tools in order to be able to do that. These are the very things that allowed mankind to start elevating himself above the surrounding species. And he did that for a specific purpose. Why did he want to have a shelter? Why did he want to have a few, I don't know what, goats or something, pigs, whatever, that were being kept locally, that he didn't have to go and hunt? Why was he cultivating crops? And the answer is, he wanted to be able to predict that the next day he'd be able to eat. The next day, if it rained, he would stay dry. The next day, if it was going to be cold, he would stay warm. It was all about prediction. We are, in fact, all about prediction. How did he do that? Well, he used his intelligence to generate an element of control over his environment. That is the key to how we operate. And if you just look around you today, the systems, the very intricate and sophisticated systems we have today, really are a consequence of mankind exercising control over the environment. Everything. Everything. And it all has the same purpose. And that purpose is to be able to predict the outcome of various things. Simple things are not going hungry, staying dry, etc. But clearly, as we got more sophisticated, it becomes about, how do I make sure that I have enough money to cover my costs at the end of the month? That's a prediction. It's a predictive statement. You can predict what your costs are. How are you going to predict your income to cover those costs? Well, this is what we're all about. This is how we operate. This is why we focus on education for our children. From the point of view of an employee, somebody wants to get ahead in a corporate environment. What do? You educate yourself better qualifications, obviously. You get to work earlier than everyone else. You kiss the boss's butt better than the other people. Whatever you have to do in a corporate environment. But it's all basically about getting ahead and figuring out what you can do in order to be able to predict that outcome. If you've got your own business, similar. What do you want to survive and you want to be profitable? Well, you look around, you see what your competitors are doing, you look for any gaps in the market, you look to see where the weaknesses are in your own business. I mean, that's what a SWOT analysis basically is, that we all learned in basic business studies. Your strengths and your weaknesses, you develop your weaknesses, employ better staff, cut costs, do better marketing. I mean, these are all things that we do to try and exercise an element of control over our environment to generate a predictable result. And if we can't predict the result, we don't like it. We're very unhappy with that. That's why it's quite difficult to be an entrepreneur. It's quite difficult to have your own business. It's much less predictable. It's the reason why so many people stick with employment. And it's perfectly understandable. Having a job. Why do we prefer having a job rather than going out and working for ourselves? Well, it's because come the end of the month, you can predict you're going to get paid. If you get sick, you can predict you're still going to get paid, etc., etc., etc. So it's all the same thing. Having control over our environment is essential for us in order to be able to predict outcomes. And in fact, both nature and nurture, as I say, both our genetics as well as our environment, what our parents teach us, our education systems, everything conspires to ensure that, as I say, this is our default operating mechanism. So, why is this a problem? Well, there's two reasons. First of all, when it comes to the markets, we have no ability, absolute zero, in being able to control that environment. Nothing. So if you're in a trade and it's going against you, then the only option available to you, if assuming that you don't have a stop loss or whatever, because I mean you can always exit the trade, so that's the one option. But if, as I've seen with many people, they've actually removed their stop losses because they believe the market has to come back. They believe so much in their prediction that they will not allow themselves to be proven wrong, and so have removed their stop loss. Eventually, when it starts getting too painful, the only two options, they either take the full loss, which is unacceptable to most people. The only other option really is to get down on your knees and start praying. So you don't really have an ability at all to control this environment that we're looking at here, called the market. That goes completely against the grain for us. Completely. Everything else that we do, very clearly, is geared towards gaining control of the environment so that our natural tendency, in fact, our natural engineering of our brain can be satisfied towards predicting an outcome. We can't do that here. We absolutely can't do that. This is called a deterministic mindset. That's what I'm leading up to. And that's the one problem, is that we can't. Okay, so we can't control the environment. B, we can't predict. And that ties back into what I was saying, where we are dealing effectively with randomness. But there's another problem here, and these two go very much together, and it's essential that you understand that this is what you're dealing with. This deterministic mindset that we all have, you have it, I have it, everyone has it, it also leads to something else, this human trait of having expectations. And this is another one of the key points that Mark Douglas makes in his book. Our expectations, where it comes from, our belief system, etc. Our belief system, again, is tied deeply into the ability to predict and control our environment, and therefore we have these things called expectations. So getting down to a practical level here, I'm sure for those of you who've spent any time trading or thinking about trading, researching trading, talking about trading, you will have heard people say all the time, yes, it's so important to have the right trader's mindset. You must be self-disciplined, you must be patient, and most importantly, you must be unemotional, especially about your losses. Anyone not heard that? But again, just like the definition of a good trader, it's one thing for people to say that that's what you must be, but nobody seems to have any ability to show us how. One thing to say you must be unemotional about your trading, but how do you develop that kind of a mindset where you are unemotional about your trading, especially your losses? Because they actually come from this thing called expectations. I mean, if you don't have any expectations of a particular event and that event doesn't transpire, well, I mean, you're not going to care. The only reason you will feel disappointment or betrayal of some kind and there will be emotional consequences is because of expectations. We all know what people say about assumption. Well, it's not actually about assumption. Expectations are, in fact, the big problem over here. In fact, assumptions are a form of expectation. So expectations are our biggest enemy, and they are therefore, or it is the enemy within. This is the number one problem that you have to deal with as a trader. Now, Mark Douglas's book, Trading the Zone, talks about this in significant detail. I'm not going to rehash the whole book. That's for you to go away and read and for us to discuss in the future. But it is important that you understand that this is what we have to deal with. This is the crux of the matter when it comes to the mindset. The natural mindset is to have expectations and to make all of our decisions based on these expectations. And these expectations tied completely to our desire and need to predict an outcome. So Mark Douglas goes into this in detail and talks about how you kind of need to reprogram yourself. He's not wrong. There is an element of that we can do, but his book sort of kind of leaves a few things open. It's not specific enough about some things which could lead to potential misunderstanding, which we'll talk about individually in the future. But he also assumes that it's possible to reprogram ourselves to effectively become like a computer. And that's just not possible. And I think it shows, therefore, how Mark Douglas might be the world's number one guru and mentor for professional traders and have that reputation. But somebody like Nassim Taleb, on the other hand, again, very important books for you to read, is probably one of the most successful traders in the world. And he says there's just no way. I mean, we're all human beings, and we can never move away from that. We can do some element of reprogramming, but at the end of the day, you cannot escape your humanness. The only thing we can do is, in fact, in some ways, to trick ourselves. Now, that sounds a little bit sneaky and lightweight. It's not. They're actually highly effective techniques that we use as professional traders to help ourselves deal with the things that we need to, as you will see. It's really, really important that you appreciate what you are, where you're coming from, and what you have to deal with.